Ben 10 is back in a brand new video game. Play as all new aliens. Team up to take down the Highbreed and save the planet from destruction. Ben 10 Alien Force in stores now. Rated everyone 10 and up.
Much like Summer Vacation, the original Ben 10 couldn't last forever, but as a franchise, Cartoon Network thought otherwise. I mean, can you blame them? It would eventually become their most successful IP, getting on the top 100 highest grossing media franchises in the world. Ben Tennyson is on the same leagues as Mario, Sonic, Pikachu, Mickey Mouse, Spider-Man, and whatever this thing is. So even though the original series ended in 2007 after 4 seasons, they already had a sequel underway. 2008's Ben 10 Alien Force. Taking place 5 years after the original series, Ben is now living a normal life without the Omnitrix, despite in the original series hating the idea of being normal and wanting the power to help people. But we need that dramatic scene of him putting the Omnitrix back on, because this series is dork. I mean, literally, most of the episodes take place at night, so whenever we'd see the characters in the middle of the day or in a lit room, they looked off because we're so used to seeing them in the shade. So he gets it back after he finds out that Grandpa Max is missing and there's a new threat called the Highbreed. Ben must form a team to stop the upcoming invasion, all without his mentor. The series is beloved for its storytelling, characterization, and aiming towards an adolescent audience. The new aliens like Humongosaur, BigChill, and Echo were all cool. My favorites were Brainstorm, because he was a big crab, and Goop, because he was a big goop. Heck, Jetray actually influenced the name of my first YouTube channel, Jetray102, and it was nice to see Ben finally make amends with Kevin as the two would slowly form a brotherly friendship. So you know I like the show, and that I have fond memories of it. And boom, they had a game, let's talk about it! Ben, Gwen, and Kevin have to locate a piece of unidentified alien technology. On their way, they meet a Tetraman named Gorvan, who's after the same thing. He claims that the DNAliens and Highbreed are after it as well, and so are the Forever Knights. So they work together to retrieve the pieces of this device and keep it safe from the wrong hands. The story isn't really much to write home about. If anything, it just feels like a standard episode of Alien Force, which is both good and bad. It's good because it fits with the show, and there's even evidence to suggest that this game might actually be canon, as Gorvan would later appear in several episodes of Ben 10 Omniverse. But it's bad because it's just not that interesting. In Ben 10 Protector of Earth, the story felt like it could work as a special or a straight-to-TV movie, with how much was packed in it. Familiar faces all working together using Omnitrix crystals to defeat Ben as Vilgax attempts to swallow the Earth into the null void. It's probably because the original game was made after Season 3, so they had a lot more material to work with. As Ben 10 Alien Force, the game came out only 6 months after the show premiered, so they didn't have as much to go off of. Sure, they probably could have used elements from the original series, making a glimpse into the past where we see where old friends and enemies are now, but I'd be willing to bet they probably weren't allowed to do that as not to interfere with the possible plans the writers had. Considering some old faces would come back to the show anyway, it could have confused audiences as to why the game and the show had 2 different versions of the same character, but that's just my theory. Speaking of the original game, it had a cool cel-shaded art style with thick outlines, flashy attacks, great effects, and weight to almost everything you did, trying not only to recreate the art style of the show, with backgrounds having more detailed textures, but also adapting it into something that works for a video game on the PlayStation 2 or Wii. With the exception of the stiff cutscenes, I'd say the game's visuals have stood the test of time better than most. So how does Ben 10 Alien Force compare?
Wah, wah, wah.
Oh no, that's no good. It's not ugly per se, but much like the story, it's just so standard. The unique art style is gone as there's no cel-shaded models or thick outlines, as everything just looks so muddy. Attacks don't hold the same weight as they used to, effects are barely present, and overall it's just so boring to look at. It's like when you first get out of bed and you still got your bedhead hair, you're groggy, tired, and you look like you want to kill the first person you see. But Protector of Earth is after you've cleaned yourself up, had your morning coffee, and are ready to take on the day. But I guess you could also say that about the show's presentation too. Okay, I'll stop. Now is not the time or place for that. Now it's time for the gameplay. It takes most of its inspiration from the first game, as both are 3D action titles with beat-em-up elements and unlockable moves. For those who are unfamiliar with Ben 10 Protector of Earth, allow me to explain how this game works. You start off as Ben, as you choose between one of 5 transformations. At the beginning of the game, you only have Swampfire and BigChill, but as you progress, you unlock SpiderMonkey, Jetray, and Humongosaur! God, I love how each transformation and alien force announces themselves. I don't know, it's like in a shonen anime where a character says the name of their attack as they're using it. Each alien has their own abilities, attacks, and combos, and you'll have to use each one to not only face off against enemies, but to also solve puzzles. However, you can only be an alien for so long before the Omnitrix times you out, and you have to wait for it to recharge. Unfortunately, no, you do not unlock Master Control in this game, so that's something you'll have to deal with throughout the entire thing, minus the last level, which I'll go over later. As you beat enemies, you get experience to unlock button combinations attached to powerful flashy moves, though they aren't as flashy as the original game, and one big problem is that you'll unlock every single move long before the game is over. Heck, you might even get every other alien's combo attacks before unlocking Humungosaur. This is disappointing because in the original game, you wouldn't have unlocked every single combo attack unless you returned to earlier levels to grind. That meant that before beating the game, there was still so much to do besides looking for the 3 Sumo Slammer cards in each level. But while those cards do return in this game, there isn't much of a reason to go back to earlier levels besides that. Well, are the moves at least so broken and overpowered that they become a blast to use? Like basically half of Canon Bolt's moves in the first game? Not really. There is BigChill's Ice Breath that freezes enemies for a certain period of time. This move is completely broken because you'd think that bosses wouldn't be affected the same way as enemies would be, but no. Many bosses like Volcanus and Kevin can be frozen for just as long as enemies, and if you time your next Ice Breath right, you can keep them still throughout the entire fight. So there's at least one overpowered move, but I would argue that it's not as fun. At least with Cannon Bolt's moveset, enemies and bosses can still fight back, but here not so much, so you go from feeling like an overpowered boss character to just winning every fight. Look, if I'm going to completely destroy these bosses, just shatter their rib cages, causing internal bleeding, I would at least like them to still have somewhat of a chance to beat me. That's sad, but at least they tried to make up for it by adding 2 new playable characters, Kevin and Gwen. Kevin can absorb matter, but only at these specific points for some reason, as he covers his entire body in said element. Gwen has martial arts and her mana powers, but besides that, they don't really play all that differently from Ben or any of his aliens. Such a shame because there's so much you could do with these two, but they're only utilized for about 2 levels each. Now I know a lot of people may not like me comparing this game to the original. I'm not saying that it's bad because it's different. It's bad because of the specific decisions made. They could have done something entirely new, and it could have come out great. Being different or change are not inherently good or bad things. They're a variable that could go either way depending on how they're handled. Change is good, and it's great to move on to try something new, but that doesn't mean we should just blindly embrace everything that is new. It's like the people who complain about those who say they want new IPs when a movie that is a new IP doesn't do well. Yeah, we want new IPs, but it doesn't mean we're just going to blindly show anything that is new. We want new stuff, but we also want good stuff. We should not be expected to slam down our wallets on every release of a new IP just to validate our opinions. Also, have you not considered that maybe the people you talk to online about entertainment only take up a small percentage of the actual audience? You'll find that the mainstream that will gladly consume every reboot they find greatly eclipses losers on the internet who obsess over media like me. In other words, shut up! Guardia Room. Also, when talking about a sequel or a new installment to a series, these comparisons are necessary because of what you're following up. The game just feels like a typical licensed game. It's just there. While the original game was fantastic, I would argue it was one of the better licensed games of the era that didn't feel like a licensed game. This one is just that. It's so okay and serviceable, and I think I might know why. Many people claim that the original series was made to sell toys. This isn't true, as Ben 10 Classic didn't get toys or video games until later in its life. As the series debuted in December 2005, its first wave of toys didn't come out until 2006. Many people make this claim as an attempt to defend the reboot. Look, before anyone assumes it, I don't hate the reboot. I think it's a fine show that I wouldn't mind going into more detail with in the future, but just because you want to defend something that you like doesn't give you the right to spread misinformation. The reboot was made to sell toys, and it was directly influenced by its toy manufacturer, Playmates, which is why Wildvine and Stinkfly's new designs are the way they are. Ben 10 Alien Force's first wave of toys came out the same year as the series debuted, but what about the games? Ben 10 Protector of Earth came out in 2007, as Ben 10 Alien Force the game came out only 6 months after the series debuted in 2008. Licensed games usually have shorter development cycles than most standard releases, but it's still more likely that the game started development before the series released. Then we go over the lack of a tagline. Most licensed games based on cartoons or TV shows have an additional title. Fairly Odd Parents, Shadow Showdown, Ben 10, Protector of Earth, The Simpsons, Hit and Run. Of course, there are the occasional outlier like Shaolin Showdown and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, but that's typically how it goes. This is usually because while it's the overall goal of a licensed game to help advertise what they're based on, these games are still typically made with the show still going, so they can experiment more with the story and do something unique. In other words, it's another adventure that either does or could exist within their already established universe. Of course, this still depends on what is considered canon or not. While movie tie-ins usually have to recreate the story that's being told, or if they do a different story, it has to play it safe as not to confuse the audience. This is also why many movie tie-ins don't have a tagline or an extended title, because if kids playing the game want to see the movie that's about to come out, then they won't get confused when trying to find it online or purchase movie tickets. Madagascar, Shrek 2, Over the Hedge, you get my point. Not only this, but most of these games either have to come out before the movie does, or at the very least, while it's still in theaters. Ben 10 Alien Force the game fits all of those qualities. It only came 6 months after the show premiered, and has no additional title or tagline, and its story plays it safe. It's a cartoon game that got the same treatment as a movie tie-in. Yeah, both of these games are used to advertise the show they're based on, but one is at least fun, and it doesn't feel like a typical license game, while the other isn't even trying to hide what it is. Ben 10 Alien Force is still a great show, however this game is not. But maybe the final level can change that. I did say that while there is no master control, that the last stage doesn't obey the Omnitrix's limiter. And in this stage, you turn into Humongosaur and grow into your biggest size, stomping on waves of DNAliens and destroying their weather machines, and probably the most frustrating platforming stage this series has ever offered. All for an anticlimactic non-ending that just says, go watch the show, you numbnuts. The Omnitrix is starting to look more like a normal watch, because I can see that I just wasted my fucking time.